this is loud enough. I can't hardly hear myself. I'm a little stopped up. So if you can hear me, that's okay. Tonight, our thought's going to be geared towards youth. And this doesn't necessarily mean the youngsters in the congregation. I know that you hear Bo talk to you a lot, and parents talk to you a lot, and grandparents and people that you probably don't know talk to you and tell you what to do. But I think that if you'll listen tonight and think about some of the things that the Scripture tells us, that it might be helpful and it might be all right if you do some of these things. Now, the rest of us remember that we can't say, what is it they say, do as I say, not as I do. So these are things that can probably help us all and benefit. Let's think about some of the key verses, or some of the verses that talk about youth. First, we're going to read several scripture tonight, so I've got them here in front of me, and you don't have to try and keep up, but I will call them out if you want to go to them. 1 Timothy 4, verse 12. Let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, show yourself an example of those who believe. So just because you're young doesn't mean you can't still project and portray a very positive and be a positive influence. Proverbs 22, verse 6. A lot of us know this by heart. Train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And another concept, we can be like Christ at any age. Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men, and that's Luke 2:52. We can be an example of believers in the way we talk. Matthew 12, verse 34 and 35. This is Jesus talking here. It says, "You brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak what is good? For the mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart. The good man brings out of the good treasure of what is good, and the evil man brings out of his evil treasure what is evil." Also, we would do well, all of us, to guard what we say. Ephesians 4:29. Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. Now, there's ball games been going on, and everybody knows this is basketball season. Sometimes that's a hard one to do. And I'll just, it is. It's difficult. So be careful what comes out, because people are listening all the time. Talk about some ways that we can show love. Matthew 22, verses 36 through 38. "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" And he said to them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. This is the foremost commandment." So love is a very important part and an example we can set. In true love, and not a hypocritical love. 1 Peter, verse 1:22. "Since you have in obedience to the truth purified your souls for a sincere love of the brethren, fervently love one another from the heart." Hopefully that one's not as hard. Sometimes it's easy to get upset with someone, but love them anyway. I like to think that Katrina loves me despite myself a lot of the time. Okay? Devotion, total commitment to the Lord. Matthew 6, verse 33 says, "But seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." A whole dedication. Luke 10, verse 27. "And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, and all of your soul, and with all of your strength, and with all of your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And that's a pretty tall order, but I think if we really work on that, we've definitely got an example in front of us that we can work towards that goal. Your faithfulness is another way that you can be an example. Endurance to the end, even when tempted. Matthew chapter 10, verse 22 says, "You will be hated by all because of my name, but it is the one who has endured to the end who will be saved." It doesn't suggest an easiness, does it? It doesn't. As a matter of fact, it actually suggests something pretty tough, pretty hard to do. And then faithfulness till death. Revelation 2, verse 10. "Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life." Purity is an excellent way to also show others and to be an example. James chapter 1, verse 27 tells us that pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God and Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. And so that's hard to do sometimes. It's really hard to focus on others, and it's really hard to always make the right decision. And this one's one that you guys will remember and probably could quote. We're holy and a living sacrifice. Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. "Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect." I'm going to give you some examples of some biblical characters and some men that lived a long time ago that were very young but did very great things. So just remember, age is a number, and it's about your goals and your actions that matter. But think of Daniel in 1 Samuel chapter 17. Daniel, and some of the scholars in here can tell me, does it tell us how old he was? Because I read it a little bit and I didn't see that. Just a young man, the youngest son. This is where he fights Goliath, the Philistine giant, a very young man. Joseph in Genesis chapters 33 through 50 talks about his time spent in Egypt and the trials and suffering and the growing he did there. Daniel chapter 1 and then verses 5 through 16 introduces us to right after King Nebuchadnezzar has taken the land, and he pulls those youth without blemish and feeds them and educates them, and that's the beginning of Daniel and all the great things he was able to do at a very young age. And then probably one of the best examples we can think of is Jesus in Luke chapter 2, and reads verses 42 through 52, where it's his first trip to Jerusalem, and his parents go home and he stays. And so he, being a very young man, does some very great things. So remember, it's not all about age. It's about attitude and all the things that you're capable of doing. That concludes my thought of the night. I just like all of us to consider these things. These aren't something we stop doing at any particular age. And these are all wonderful ideas, and it's in there for a reason. I'd encourage all of us to think about that and to be better examples. And lucky for us that we have an avenue of prayer when we fail, and that we have the support group of this congregation when we fail. If you do have a need tonight and you do need prayers of this congregation. I know that we have many willing to do that with you. Or if you have never become a Christian and tonight is the night that you'd like to do that, we ask you all to come and as we stand and sing.